This is Orchid Pony, technically the 7th installment in the Rainbow Spring project, but it also works as the second color if you work the rainbow in reverse order. Purple was an old friend's favorite color, if I remember correctly, and if not, purple was a definite part of her color palette. I can't be asked to talk to people now, especially since my cache is full of art ideas I need to put out into the world, so I decided to communicate basically one way via pony scribble I should have had done weeks ago. But I've been looking at fancy mirrorless cameras whilst I shake my fish at the fact that all my remote viewing attempts with my current camera are cock-blocked by the Android OS and their indiscriminate use of HDCP. I know HDMI splitters are an option to bypass it, but in most cases the quality could be lowered to 720p, and I'm really sorry about my rabbit's very sudden urge to scratch at the floor. I don't know what they're looking for. My rabbits have a tendency to dig at scraps of hay that I kind of sweep into the corner before I really sweep through my room and have everything done. Except the only problem with this is that they have two very full hay racks at their disposal, but I guess it's not as fun as digging at the corner. Anyways, really the only reason I would need a camera is to live stream, but there are other ways to do so, and it's not completely necessary. And I have a sinking feeling that my phone camera has better quality than my actual camera, although that may be just my lack of knowledge on how to use these cameras. Originally, this was going to be a big 18-inch by 24-inch acrylic painting, but I looked at the size of the board I bought and realized it would take me forever. The painting itself would be fine. Recording was the forever part. I decided to scale down the size to 9 by 12 inches like the ochre corgi, and to change the medium to gouache paint. Because of the opacity of this paint, I don't have much of a pencil sketch to speak of, partly because I was bored, I wanted to get into the painting, and I figured the opacity allowed me to get away with less of a structure. That being said, the recording of the pencil sketch ended up disappearing into the void of dead SD cards anyways. I'm also working on cold press watercolor paper. While I was originally going to completely convert to hot press paper for its smooth finish like Bristol board, I wanted to use the texture of this paper. That being said, the texture does wear down the pencil more, and I was nervous about having too much graphite on my surface. If I were to do this over, I would keep the paper and use a water-soluble graphite pencil or a watercolor pencil to do the sketch. The only real obstacle to that is that those pencils do not completely erase unless you risk really digging into the paper. Another thing to consider is the opacity of gouache completely covering the pencil lines, but it's not something I want to depend on. The principal color of this piece is purple. On my palette I have a bunch of colors in half pans that I mix with zinc white from Graham to add opacity and primary white from Holbein to create a pastel shade. In the beginning I don't have to worry about keeping the gouache wet on my palette as I initially build up color, but when I need to work with the drying time of the paint, I decided to pick Graham Gouache specifically because of the honey content adding to the drying time. The biggest limitation of gouache paint is that it does not lend itself to glazing, and putting pure diluted watercolor over gouache tends to bubble up slightly instead of disperse evenly. However, gouache also allows me to paint light over dark and to focus more on my lighting as opposed to how many layers I can pile on top of each other before I regret it. I mixed ultramarine and burnt sienna and created Jane's Gray, perhaps my new favorite black, over lamp black for how clean this particular mix is on its own. It may technically break my don't use blacks at all in this piece rule. The reference photo I used for the horse ended up really lending itself to the same overall layout as ochre corgi before it. It takes away focus from the animal while still giving it some importance, as the flowers simultaneously serve as the main subject and the frame for the object or objects around it. If I painted this series in order, then the sameness between these two wouldn't be so obvious, so pretend it isn't. I began with the horse in the foreground with the intention of having the background color similar to her mane to blend her into it and bring more attention to the flowers. I had fun working with the blues and teals and other cool tones that I had missed working on when I did Ochre Lily. My palette did change slightly, but it consisted of Permanent Rose, Prussian Blue, Phthalo Blue, Lemon Yellow, and Dios Purple near the end from my student palette, and Turquoise, Mineral Violet, Jane's Gray, Titan Buff from my fancy palette. I struggled with the amount of detail I should put into the horse. I wanted it to look nice, but I didn't want to spend forever on it. I wanted to paint all the orchids. I wanted the color and dimension to be there. I just wanted to be done, and somewhere before the orchids and after the horse, I was really close to starting over in some vain hope that the next attempt would be better. But starting over would only get me to the same problem, and I would have ended up not finishing anything. Somewhere after I actually started the flowers, painting this piece became fun again, and when I finally reached a stopping point, I was happy I kept going. This pony ended up better than I expected, and really made me fall in love with working with gouache. I really like this opaque finish it adds. It feels like there's more weight to this kind of medium, literally and artistically. I'm not sure where to go with the next piece. I am partway into the blue picture of Rainbow Spring, but it is an ink drawing, and I still want to work on watercolor. I also can't decide between my acrylic inks or the slow going of color pencil. I'll probably work on that alongside a guitar painting I have and some more gouache portrait intermission paintings. I've had an itch to paint all the people who've inspired my style up to this point, more so to have a rendition of them to put up on some inspiration board I want to make and to practice drawing faces. There also haven't been any kitten intestines in my paintings lately.